We're talking about UFOs in part because a recently released Pentagon report on the phenomena has reignited interest in extraterrestrial life. Joining us in Dunedin is space physicist Craig Roger, who's going to shed some light on what we do and don't know is out there. And Craig joins me now. Hi.
Hi, kia ora, Jesse.
Nice to have you on the show, and thank you very much for putting your hand up to do this for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I guess the first question is, do you want to believe?
Do I want to believe? Well, I am a scientist, and therefore I believe in things, but I have a healthy skepticism to requiring me to be convinced of my beliefs.
Okay,
I would love if, fundamentally the idea that there might be intelligent life out there strikes me as being completely reasonable given the scale size of the universe. And then the issue is, are they visiting us, taking pictures and, coming down and having picnics? That's where I would need quite high levels of evidence.
Yeah, understandably. How did you get into this particular area?
Well, honestly, I'm a space physicist, so I'm really interested in how the sun and the earth interact and the properties of space around the earth. And so I liked looking up and looking at the night sky, and honestly, I read lots of science fiction as a child. And so this isn't my specialist area. I'm not a UFO expert per se, but I know some stuff about space, and I look up.
Great. Well, can you give us, and we might come back to the space weather if we get time at the end of the interview, but can you give us a bit of a context to this Pentagon report on UFOs?
Yeah, so as I understand it, there was a requirement from the elected officials in the US government. They went to the US military and said, we are hearing from multiple sources about reports of what you and I would call UFOs. They've actually gone away and renamed them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. And the elected officials stated that the Pentagon had to go away and make a report and tell the elected officials what they knew.
And this would have been quite exciting for people who are interested in UFOs, right? Finally forced to come clean about this potentially classified or previously hidden material.
So it seems, and there was a huge amount of buzz around it in the international media in the lead up. It almost feels to me as if there was some attempted leaks to just get people into the general framework of what might be coming out, which essentially was there was no smoking gun saying we have discovered aliens and we've got them locked in our basement, but at the same time and when I say they, I mean parts of the US military have credible reports of things that they cannot explain at this time.
Okay. Have you had a look at the report?
Oh, yes, I have. Honestly, it's publicly available. Well, the report that was released to the world is a publicly available document. It is 9 pages of PDF, of which about half of those 9 pages have real writing on it, and the rest of it is just sort of government report bump. So it's not a particularly difficult report to read at all.
And what's in it?
Most of it is... So there's a little bit of hard detail and then a lot of just general words. So they, one of the things they are pretty upfront about is that the US military has discouraged its people from reporting this sort of thing in the past. And they recognise that may actually be a problem, and that people who don't feel, let's say, safe to tell their superior what they said, because they're then criticised that maybe they have a mental illness, or maybe they've been taking drugs, or something that makes them seem unreliable. But that the powers that be are now saying, we want this information because it could tell us something important about our world or our opponents.
Yeah, that was something that came up a bit before the report was published, that if they found out that the Chinese or the Russians had aircraft capable of doing the things that were being reported, that would be almost as interesting as finding out that they were from outer space.
I imagine... Yes, almost as interesting, and in some cases immediately maybe more. It depends what your role is, but if you are sitting in the US military and you know that let's say, Russia and China and maybe a small number of other countries really are your current opponents, knowing that they had capacities or capabilities that you don't have, that would keep you awake at night. Aliens might be friendly.
What sorts of things are in the report then, and any of particular interest to you?
Well, there's a section in there where they say there are 5 different classifications which things might fall into.
Yeah.
And the last classification is other, which I think might mean aliens and completely unknown physics. And I mean that's not uninteresting, but it's a bit of a grab bag for we just don't know. But there is a section in there where they say, well, there's things that might be atmospheric, and we don't understand the physics of what's happening. And I find that idea that, stuff happens and we can't always explain all of it immediately. Sometimes things happen and it opens up a new area of science to us, and we just never noticed it before. So that's one of the things I'm actually excited about in this report, is that they are telling people in the United States military and also the civilian aviation sector, the FAA, that they're going to ingest all of these reports and try to understand them. And I personally think that's really, really positive, because it's going to create a database of stuff, and then they're going to try and explain what those reports are describing, and I'm hoping that we will get something new, some new science, some new physics coming out of that.
Greg would like to know, he's in Christchurch, Ototahi, he wants to know, what is the worldwide trend in the last 20 years in UFO sightings? And I suspect what Greg might be getting at is it feels like they may have dropped off a little bit, sort of coinciding with the arrival of the mobile phone camera.
That's my impression too, I've got to say. I grew up as a kid getting all of those interesting books and things that you got about the wider world.
Yeah.
And I've got copies of Chariots of the Gods from Von Daniken that I bought in the Regent 24-hour book sale in Dunedin when I was a kid. And there seemed to be a lot of that sort of material around. And I also agree that seems to have been a decrease in those sorts of reports, although it's not quite, like you never hear any reports of Bigfoot anymore or anything like that, and I guess that's because everybody's got a camera in their pocket. But the thing I do find really interesting is that a lot of these reports came from professional aviators, from US military people, and sometimes, and in many cases, apparently backed up with sensor data. So maybe a radar return, something like that, to say that there really is a physical object that person is looking at. Now, I'm not saying that means it's alien. It's just that there is something there that they don't know they don't understand why it's there, they don't understand what it's doing. In some cases, they don't understand how it's behaving. And opening up to the fact that they want to understand that better, and obviously I'm hoping that it'll expose some new physics. I mean, that's happened before. That's just it. There's been instances where we've pointed cameras at the sky and seen things that that was not recognised in the scientific community, but airline pilots had been seeing for decades, but no one wanted to officially report it because then people would think they were on drugs and that would be bad.
Mm-hmm. A couple of interesting points coming in here. I'm going to put Chris's question to you first on text. Chris says, I know that mere observation is not a form of scientific evidence, but if your guest actually saw something that was unmistakably a UFO, would it change his opinion on them?
Well, it's a fascinating thought. I mean, how do you decide it's unmistakably a UFO? I mean, I totally believe that there are things that happen in the sky that I can't identify. I haven't yet had that experience, but I've had the start of that experience. I have seen things in the sky and gone, what on earth is that? And stared at it, and, I had a moment. Earlier this year, Jesse, I took my partner up to the Hermitage and was watching Mount Aoraki, and we were taking pictures of the stars with the mountain in the background, and then suddenly this line of fast-moving stars came over the horizon. And it just blew my mind to see it. And eventually I worked out it was one of those star trains.
Yes, Starlink.
Right? It was about Starlink, yeah. And it was about 2 fists held at arm's length wide, and it was moving fast, and there were all these really bright dots.
And it seemed very low, didn't it?
Exactly. And I've read about this, but I'd never seen it myself. And I was I was both excited and a little bit scared and just thinking, what on earth is that? It was such an exciting moment. And so, you know, when you look up, you see things and you can't always explain them. If I got to the point of saying, well, that is truly unidentified, I would not be upset about that because I'm a professional scientist. There are a whole lot of things that happen in my life which I can't actually explain.
Michael's got in touch. He says that Ian M. Banks, the sci-fi author, maintains that there are other civilizations out there, but that we are too uncivilized, violent and destructive for them to make themselves known and share their technology. He says it's pretty arrogant of us to believe we're the only civilization in such a huge expanse. So what would you say to that, Professor Craig Roger, the idea that we might not even be able to recognise or otherwise get in touch in the way that we perhaps understand it?
It's not inconceivable. I mean, you know, fundamentally, it is possible that there are civilizations out there that are communicating using technology that is beyond us, and we just don't know how to look, and that maybe for whatever reason they are trying not to talk to us, and the universe is incredibly big. At the moment, a lot of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is using radio waves. There are some efforts to try and use to go search for coherent laser light, because the feeling that maybe that's being used as a communications technique between the stars. I am not uncomfortable with the idea that the universe is so unbelievably big that there are other intelligent life forms out there. The partial problem is that the universe is so unbelievably big that they could be so unbelievably far away from us that we'll never actually know about them.
Hillary wants to know what your view is on crop circles. She says if NASA can send a golden LP of music out of the solar system in the hope someone out there can play it, couldn't these people, or couldn't these crop circles perhaps be mathematical correspondents from other civilizations? Well,
the issue I have with crop circles is that my understanding is that there's a group of people with a mathematical background from Cambridge who said, well, we went out and started making them, and then it became a bit of a fad, particularly in the UK.
Yeah, I think they've been. Sam's asking on email about crop circles as well. I'm pretty sure people admitted it was a prank. Could be wrong.
A lot of people have admitted that it's a prank, and of course this is another part of the problem. Unless they kept really good records of every crop circle they made, is there also some alien trying to talk to us via crop circles? It just seems like a really odd way to try and communicate with us, though. To me, it seems like a really strange way to communicate, to knock down bits of grass.
How would you communicate with us if you were in charge of the alien life comms team?
I think really simple, trying to do really simple mathematical patterns, first of all, probably in radio waves, maybe with a flashing light. Because, certain things happen in random activity happens, but you want to start off by putting a pattern out there that somebody can say that's not random, and then build on maths, because maths is the language of science. It's hard for us to conceive of a race that can communicate on the sort of scale sizes that we're talking about, that won't have a fundamental grasp of mathematics.
How much of a priority is it for people who study space to find out whether there is intelligent life out there? Is it regarded as an important and credible part of science in that area, or is it more of a fun kind of nice to have fringe discipline?
It's certainly fun, but it's more of a smaller part of the wider game. A much larger and more accepted question is around life, not necessarily intelligent life, but just life. How hard is it to get life going? Is there life elsewhere in our solar system? It's clear now that there are lots and lots of planets around other stars. At the moment, we don't have any evidence that there is life around on those other planets. And so starting off with life inside our solar system, is there any evidence of life on Mars? How did life start on Earth? Could there have been life on Venus before the runaway greenhouse effect happened? A lot lot of the thrust of why people are going to Mars at the moment, in terms of scientific exploration of Mars, is around the question of life.
Yeah, and presumably there is something out there, even if it's just bacteria. How advanced would the life need to be for you to get excited?
Honestly, if there was any life that we were confident was not from Earth, I would be excited, because that in itself is absolutely amazing. The idea that life has started on another planet in a different way. We assume, because there is this possibility that we already know that rocks have gone from Mars to Earth, and and we believe that rocks can go from Earth to Mars. So you can imagine a possibility where life started on one of the planets and seeded the other one. We don't know this is true, but if we can get some life on Mars, probably some extremely low-level, very simplistic bacteria, one thing that would be really fascinating to do would be to say, is it based on the same sort of chemical, life-based DNA processes that we have here on Earth, or is it actually different?
Someone else points out that it's possible there are or were or will be other alien civilizations, but that given the comparative shortness of the time of humans on Earth, the chances that our timeline actually coincides with their timeline might be quite low as well.
That feels realistic. I mean, I grew up at the height of the Cold War, where the leaders of the Soviet Union and the leaders of the United States were actively threatening one another, and it really felt like any time in the next few years, the civilization that we lived in would just be gone. And so we started making high-powered radio broadcasts from Earth in the sort of 20s, 30s type time, that using radio transmitters that would actually leak out and start travelling out into space. So we haven't been signalling to the rest of our galaxy, and even only a small part of our galaxy, because the galaxy's so big, we haven't been signaling our existence for very long. And so it is quite possible that another civilization, it's just a bit too far away, or it'll be operating on a different timescale to us. It'll come and go. By the time we even find out that it exists, it's gone.
Have you had much of a look at the Kaikoura sightings in the 70s?
I faintly remember that, and there are a number of things that have happened in New Zealand. Have you heard of the Ashburton balls?
No, go on.
Right, so I understand that a series of titanium spheres fell from the sky in the Ashburton region and were found by a farmer on his property, and it turned out they had Cyrillic writing on them. They had Russian written in them, and they were actually from a Soviet probe that was meant to be launched, and the launch hadn't gone right, and it re-entered, burnt up, and they landed in New Zealand. Under the international space treaties, the New Zealand government at the time tried to give them back to the Soviet Union. They were made out of titanium, and really, that was the ability to weld titanium at the time was regarded as a really impressive engineering feat. But the Soviets didn't want to admit that they'd lost a space probe, and so I think some of them are still in the museum in Ashburton.
Wow, okay, I'll look that one up.
Please do, because I think that's really cool. I want to go visit them as well.
Hayden says that someone he knows about 5 weeks ago saw an unidentified object fall from the sky in Kaharangi National Park. And I just wanted to point out something that I've learnt on this show before, which is it is a phenomenon of asteroids and other things falling to Earth that it looks like they're falling quite close. Have you heard this before, Craig?
Absolutely. In fact, I remember one night standing outside my house right in the middle of Dunedin. I was waiting to be picked up by a friend who was going to drive me to a party, and I looked up at the sky and I saw a green thing fall from the sky, and I really felt like it had landed in the school across the road. But in fact, it was a meteor, and it was probably burning up tens of kilometres above me. It was green, though. That was pretty cool. And the fact that I could see that right in the middle of Dunedin, again, that was fabulous. But I really encourage more people to look up, and clearly some of the people who are writing into you today are looking up, because there are some neat things happening in the sky.
If you did discover there was another alien race on a planet, what would you be most interested to find out?
That is really... Like, if we could communicate, if we could actually communicate, I would like to know about their stories. I mean, I think that's when you go away and read books from other cultures here on Earth, sometimes it's the stories that tell you about how those people think. Obviously, I would like to know about their science. Can they make a faster computer, or do they understand how to make space travel, or can they, cure cancer, or make COVID go away? That would all be fun, but it would be so insightful to talk to a brain that was fundamentally not human, if we can. I mean, because I imagine that's going to be really, really difficult for us to build up enough of a language repertoire that we can actually have a culturally significant communication.
Thanks for your time today.
No worries.
Space physicist Professor Craig Roger in Dunedin on UFOs, or as they're more popularly called these days, UAPs.